Good evening, everybody. This is Cinnamon Noir.
And this is the Ramen Shaman.
Welcome to Epistory Typing Chronicles. So,
Typing tutors.
yes, if you've ever watched anything on Greg's channel before, you probably know of my insane love for typing games. I wouldn't call this a typing tutor. It really is more of a typing game. In fact, I wanted to play this for the channel because this is, in fact, one of the most complicated typing games I've ever played in my life. I would not describe it so much as a typing tutor as an adventure game, kind of like a Zelda Light, with typing. Typing in this game is how you...
Once upon a time.
Oh, I'll let the game explain it.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
You hack.
There was a girl.
Stole that from Charles Dickens.
And she rode upon the back of a great fox.
And using a girl. He copyrighted
But they were
that,
lost.
too.
They had always been lost.
Clearly. Probably not the giant fox, though.
No.
Until a path appeared.
I would
And
actually...
So she followed.
People would actually like to read Charles Dickens if that was the case. So this game actually has a very interesting control scheme. You can use WASD if you want, but as you can see, the game is organized in this diagonal fashion. And it's arranged such that you can use E, F, I, and J to move around, which makes it easier to type.
Oh!
Another very interesting thing in this game, all the menus can be controlled through typing alone. You can just type out the words that you see in front of you, and it'll take you to that tab. So you might have just seen, I typed in audio/video. Now I typed back, and it goes back to the previous menu screen. And since you can pause and unpause with tab, basically you never have to take your hands out of the spider position playing this game.
Or was she leading it?
Which is a very good decision,
She
actually.
didn't know.
Since this is also one of the more difficult typing games I've ever played.
I like the narration so far.
Yeah, she's good. I was actually almost going to say, this game is like my version of Bastion. It's like a version of Bastion I actually like.
This was actually reminding me a lot of the way Bastion was narrated.
Because instead of
Or-
obsessively clicking to attack, you type, which is much more me.
Of course, also the fact that the path is
stretched
appearing
deeper
in
into
front
the
of
Oh
you.
yeah, absolutely.
She remembered.
Yeah, the way they do it in this
Amy's
game is kind of
following
interesting.
blades.
You're not
She
in the
remembered
sky,
fleeting
so it doesn't appear
fires.
below you, it just sort of unfolds. Later on we'll find there's a reason for that. There's actually a lot of very not-so-subtle symbolism in this game. But you'll see that. I'll be expecting you to get the symbolism, you know. Anyway, so the map, you can see if we zoom out, there's a lot of the map that has not been revealed yet. It ends up being
She
pretty
felt
big.
The woods begin to wake up around her.
I think it's nicely compact for an adventure game, so you don't get lost, and there's some ways of moving around faster. But it is as big as it needs to be. It's not as small as it might seem when you first start playing. Which is what makes this, I think, a proper adventure game.
It also seems to have an upgrade path.
There is. There is an upgrade path in this game that is point-based. You get points for typing, of course.
Why? What?
When you hear that different style of narration, by the way, and the different method of writing, that tells you that it's a different voice. Technically, these voices are both the same person, but there's a difference between them, which, again, I'll be expecting you to figure
She dared
out.
not try to cross the fragile flows.
Not dare my ass. You're not letting me. Oh well. There's no point in trying to push this game and put in mechanics it doesn't have.
She remembered
Anyway, these are
discovering
just little
precious
things on the
stones.
side that you can type
She remembered
to make
exploring
flowers
twisted
appear or
paths.
break rocks. It helps you keep a combo going, which you can see at the bottom of the screen there.
Getting kind of an Okami vibe, too.
That's what I was going to say, yes. It's a lot like
This is
Okami.
not my muse.
Your job is to fix everything. Actually, we will see soon, this game also is similar to another game where your job is to fix everything in a world. But I'm going to leave that up to you to figure out, because if I told you what game it's similar to, that would completely give away the twist, such as it is.
Dangers awaited beyond the forest.
And the unbeatable objects are non-ASCII characters, of course.
Yes, of course. Yeah, those are runes. I'm pretty sure they're all made up, like some kind of made-up alphabet. But a lot of
She
people
would
who
have
made
to
this
burn the
game are
brambles
French.
before she could pass through them.
They use the same alphabet as us, but I don't
She
know.
remembered finding
Maybe they're
magical
French
things
runes.
along the road.
Like how Japanese is moon runes. I never understood that comment that people make, that Japanese is moon runes. It's like, if you know about runic alphabets, they don't look all that similar.
No.
Plus, runes are letters, you know?
Yeah, runic alphabets tend to function much more like ours.
Exactly.
Sensing a terrible wrong.
Our language is
She
moon
looked
runes,
up.
really, when you get right down to it.
And fire.
Sensing
fell
a
from the
terrible
sky.
wrongness. I love that because it's just kind of awkward. Wrongness is a very strange word.
Mm-hmm.
She could have just said sensing a terrible wrong, you know? I do a bit of editing in my day job, so naturally I'm a pedantic jerk when it comes to this kind of thing.
Had a star died?
And then I'm just naturally pedantic to begin with.
She didn't know.
Anyone who saw my recent video
Yeah.
on Bioshock Infinite knows that.
Knowing
Chinese
you, that
chattering
kind of
creatures began to-
predates your day job.
Speaking of pedantic, chitinous. Not a word. It's pronounced chitinous.
Insectile
But I
things
appreciate what they were getting at with the word. All the enemies in this game are insects.
and gnashing
So
horns.
naturally, being insects, they have chitin, which is what makes them chitinous. Chitin is that sort of substance that in insects is kind of like what keratin is for us. It makes their skin and stuff. It
Yeah.
provides the backbone to their exoskeleton. Makes them crunchy instead of squishy. If your mind tends in that direction. Anywho, so that was our first little circle challenge. There are these little... I don't even know what to call them. I guess they're just magic circles.
She headed
Scattered
towards
all
the
over the
source of
place.
fire.
Some bigger than others.
Because
The
if
big
she
ones
didn't,
mean that an epic challenge is
would?
coming your way. The smaller ones just mean it's sort of a temporary encounter with enemies. But they all work very similarly. Like you saw, I was stuck in one
The
place
trees
there.
began to give way
And I had to
ash
just
and
deal with
flame.
all the enemies as they came at me. If an enemy ever touches you in this game, you're dead. There are no hit points or anything like that.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the things that can make it a little complicated. So, now we're starting to see a few different methods of typing. One thing I love about this game is that it doesn't just have you type in the same pool of words for every single type of thing. Instead, different
No.
stuff has different words. So those big...
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say the words seem to be related
This was
to
where
the
the
kind
meteor
of
had
thing
struck.
as well.
Sometimes
Half
they are and
indicate.
sometimes they're not. Like that scroll you saw, there's only a few of those in the game, but every time you see one, it
Or
basically requires you
did
to
it
type
begin?
in a full line of letters. Which gives it sort of this sense of magic. Except for the QWERTY
Or-
ones, because that's just silly.
Unreality.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. So now we're going to the first level in this game. There are 8 total. It's called Burning Hollow. That's, by the way, another thing that reminds me of Zelda.
She found
8 levels
herself
is kind of a
alone,
standard.
lost in darkness.
Or at least it was until recently. I'm being unfair. Majora's Mask already broke that rule.
Yeah.
And then Wind Waker was weird. It had 6. Very odd choice.
Until fire roared
So as we go
behind
through
her.
Burning Hollow, our path backward is going to be cut off by little...
The meteorite
gouts
had
of
buried
flame.
itself deep.
And we can't get
Wicked
through
things
these...
crept from its
I don't even know
core.
what they are. Like flame...
Briar and bramble blocked the path. Ancient
flame
paintings
bushes?
covered the
Flame
ways.
briar? You would think if they were on fire, that would take care of them pretty quickly, but I guess they just have the quality of
Perhaps
fire.
another life. Loneliness seeped out of them.
They look almost like lava flows, actually.
Look,
Yeah, a little bit.
who die if we don't save it?
Actually, yeah, I think it's opening up cracks in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
The cavern closed in around her, suffocating.
So, again, we cannot go through those. They do look a lot like runes, I just noticed.
Like fear
I don't pay much
manifests.
attention to them when I'm ordinarily playing this game, because this game has a tendency to make you
Only
mechanics
fire
focused
can
very
save
quickly.
her.
But now that
Yeah.
I'm looking at them, they have that strange angular quality, and sort of a square structure that's a lot like runes.
She saw something across the lava.
You know, I wonder if runes
Power
were
which the
created
meteor
specifically to be
cannot
easy to
destroy.
carve. Since most of the examples we find of them
Probably.
were carved, it's kind of like Roman letters.
Or rather, I
Something
suspect
new
that
flowed through her veins.
the one, any
Loneliness inside.
attempts at runes that weren't easy to carve would have died out in a fairly Darwinian
Artificial selection, yes. So anyway, this is the first of several powers we're going to get in this game, which is fire. Fire, in one sense, acts like a key. It means we can get through those brambles now. But there's also a combat element to it. In fact, there's a combat element to all the upgrades we'll be getting, which we will see pretty soon. The game will pretty much tell us about it. The game is also telling us that last treasure chest we opened had a fragment. Fragments are kind of interesting. They give you a hint to what the level is supposed to be like the reality that's behind the illusion. And we're going to take a look at the different stuff that we unlock as we see it, and it will probably give you some clues as to what's really going on. Actually, I've already spoiled quite a bit by telling you that this isn't reality, but whatever.
Yeah, that was a bit of a spoiler. But...
Well, to be fair, I mean, look at the text that's reading. It's obviously not related to what's going on right now.
Yeah. Although that...
The maze began to crumble before her.
Now, you know what I'm getting vibes of?
What?
Hellblade?
I have never played Hellblade. That's the one that's Senua's Sacrifice, right?
Yes,
Subtitle?
I have actually played that.
Hellblade Senua's subtitle. So, here's what our fire magic does. It sets insects on fire, which means that it will destroy the next word in the chain for enemies that have more than one word, which is the vast majority in the game. In fact, I think there may not be any that don't have... Oh, no, I'm wrong, actually. There are some enemies that literally only have one, so fire is kind of useless for them. One dynamic you may already have noticed is that we have some slow-moving enemies here, and others that move really fast.
I know that the faster-moving... It seems like some of the faster-moving ones have shorter words, though.
That's correct.
I mean,
that's the balance.
All pretty short.
That's how the game keeps itself from becoming completely overwhelming. Although, speaking of difficulty, this game does have an adaptive difficulty system, which means that if you're good at typing, it will ramp up in difficulty very quickly. Again, not to toot my own horn, but this game gets very difficult for me quickly.
I actually like adaptive difficulty.
It's interesting. I normally hate it, but what I've discovered with this is that when it's adaptive difficulty for something you're good at, it's fun. I'm just not very good at most combat systems.
I think of Resident Evil 4.
Yeah, that did have kind of an adaptive difficulty system, didn't it? But it's so disguised that I could never even tell it was there.
Well, that's what's clever about it.
It's very subtle.
At least on normal, but professional's kind of masochistic anyway.
No kidding. I've never played it on that level. I have played it on super easy mode, which is after you get the Chicago typewriter, but I've never played it on hard.
Well, yeah. Honestly, even the infinite rocket launcher, it's not quite as easy as the typewriter, but it still pretty much trivializes.
At least it's interesting.
Paintings began to look familiar.
Yeah.
To her.
Chicago typewriter is a textbook example of something that should be cool, but almost, goes back around and becomes so cool that it becomes uncool.
Well, it's cool for like the first 5 minutes.
Yeah. Anyway, we're starting to run into more enemies since I got this special
They
magic.
broke new ground together.
Later on...
Which makes sense.
Oh, yeah, of course. You've probably noticed... I shouldn't say you've probably noticed. I'm going to talk about the several types of enemies we've seen so far. So, the biggest ones we've seen so far are the ones that have short words, but a lot of them. You've seen the big crawling slugs, right? Generally, they have 3-letter words, but you need to type in a lot in a row to get them. So they're the ones that fire is most beneficial for, since they're so slow that the effect of fire can be very useful on them. As long as you make sure not to take one down all the way to start with. Slightly smaller than them are the ones that have the long words, but only 2 of them. And then smaller even than them are... It's hard to know what they even are. They're kind of like little silverfish. They move very fast, and they generally have 2 short words. So here I'm wandering around. I end up back at the entrance, which there's nothing there. It's just I got a little lost.
Yeah.
These levels are big enough that you can get kind of lost in them. Any given one is probably somewhere between a quarter and a third as big as the whole world itself. They're very big levels compared with the world.
Words.
Huh?
It helps that the words can let you sort of track where you
I never even thought of that, but you're absolutely right. That's actually very clever. I didn't like the words when I first played through this. I thought it would be better to just have them disappear. But they do actually help you remember not just like what the area is like, but what you're supposed to do there. Because the thing about memory, I'm sure you've experienced this, is sometimes it's easier to remember something when you remember what you did in an area.
Yes.
Instead of just remembering what it's like spatially.
Well, when you have something that sticks out in your memory to tie to a specific thing.
So that last chest we saw is one of my favorite types of things in this game. It's just 2 letters that alternate, but there's tons of them. So it just turns into sort of like a trigger pulling exercise. And you can go really quick on it. It's kind of fun. A little bit self-indulgent, but... I mean for the player, not for them. No, anyone who's seen the Icarus Proud Bottom series we did, which is like 10 people, will know that I really like typing games. And most of them are sort of an excuse to show off. But this is one of the few games I've played that really transcends its medium. It's not just about typing. It's a regular game that happens to use typing as a mechanic. I wish more games did that, but I guess it's just... It's a hard sell. Most people don't like typing.
Typing of the Dead does.
That's true. One thing this game kind of reminds me of sometimes is Typing of the Dead.
I think I actually have Typing of the Dead Overkill.
Yeah, no kidding. Typing of the Dead is overkill. Its story is batshit insane. One thing I like about this is it's a fairly normal story.
No. Well, yes, but I mean, there was House of the Dead Overkill.
I knew what you were talking about. I was being dumb.
The cavern opened up before, like a cathedral.
Good of you to be dumb. No, actually, I got a little lost here, but this is
Makes
the new
me
era.
look better by comparison.
Yeah, no kidding.
Even
All we have
here,
to do to make you look better by comparison is play a first-person shooter.
just waiting to be discovered.
Yeah, well.
I was trying to play Call of Juarez Gunslinger earlier, and everyone says, like, normal mode in this game is easy. You shouldn't need an easy mode. But I was playing through it, and I was like, this game just seems unfair, and there's so many bullets whizzing past, I can't get used to it.
Yeah.
My model for how hard a first-person shooter should be is BioShock, which is one of the easiest first-person shooters ever designed.
And there stood the meteor's
It's
heart.
harder at first. I can't play early hard mode BioShock.
Oh, really? Anyway, having collected all the fragments, I was just showing you there what the fragments reveal. It's the gallery on your pause menu. So generally speaking, these areas, since they all have a big end-of-area fight, they'll try to teach you something about using your powers. So in this one, you have to learn how to effectively use fire, which basically means just alternate your target. Since the next word will just burn away and you don't need to deal with it, you can change it and sort of go around in a circle. This game tends to make enemies spawn around you in a circle, so you have to alter your focus.
Yeah, especially here.
Yeah. Now again, not to brag, but I do type really fast, so I don't do what the game's actually intending me to do, which is to only type one word for each one and then move around. Here I'm just, finishing a lot of them off, one at a time. The game is still easy at this point, of course. We're going to see in the next video a case of me failing, and it is humiliating. But I'll explain that when we get to it.
Braced herself for the final
Anyway,
onslaught.
rest assured, the game gets a lot harder than this.
Oh, wow.
Full on, the fire's calm.
Oh, I love the last guy in this. They always have these incredibly long words. They do tend to use the same ones over and over again.
Cardiograms.
Electrocardiograms. I love that one. Generally speaking, one of the best things to do in this game is to upgrade the elemental powers, since they give you a lot of your punch in combat. But I'm upgrading a few incidentals here. I upgraded knockback, which is very helpful. It basically just means when you type something, the enemy will push back a little.
Though the ground would be
Where the enemy is physically on screen is very important in this game. It's probably more important overall than how many words are
left. The bitter taste of corruption clung to the land like a scar.
Yeah, that's real tough. Anyway, so we've gone through the first area. The next area we're going to take a look at is an optional one. This game actually has 4 major areas and 4 minor ones. Although the levels are about equally long, the major ones may be a little bit longer than the optional ones, but the optional ones are pretty long. I was actually going to say, technically there are 5 mandatory dungeons. The last optional dungeon is actually the final dungeon of the game. Which took me by surprise, which is good, because games don't do that very often. By tricking me into thinking it was an optional area, and actually it was the final challenge.
Roar as the angry sea raced across the land.
Oh, here we are by the sea, by the beautiful sea. So this is actually the introduction to the second chapter. One thing about this game is that because it's point-based, and you can unlock areas early, you can go a little bit out of order. This is the second mandatory dungeon, which means we're not coming here yet. This is kind of a teaser, although it's an unintentional teaser. So actually it's just me screwing up, but I hope you enjoy it anyway. No, actually we need to go even farther north than we were before. We need to go down past the Burning Hollow into the forest. Because we all know that once you've gotten to firepower, the first place you should go to test it out is the woods. That's what I learned from Boy Scouts. So anyway, I like this game's mix of optional exploration and mandatory dungeon stuff. You can wander around a lot, and after you get the ability to run, which I should probably have gotten a little bit earlier, it's not so hard to get around. It's not too tedious. You can also later unlock a teleporting ability, which comes in very handy.
I can imagine.
Here I'm just showing the new areas that you can unlock from going around to the areas with the brambles and burning them down. Still can't get past the water. You can probably guess how I'm going to do that eventually.
Ice?
Yeah, given that we literally just saw the water dungeon.
Well, and they're partially melted ice flows, too,
Exactly,
so.
right. Which the game was kind enough to tell us. It didn't say you can't cross the water, it said you can't cross the flow. With an E. I imagine a lot of people thought it was flow with a W. Those words can be a little confusing. You don't hear the word flow enough in everyday life, I think. F-L-O-E.
Well, I think for most... outside of specific geographic locations, it's not really a
That's a good point, unless you live like in Norway or something. So, here we are, right outside the woods. And there's lots of little burning brambles, just to tell you, if you haven't gone to Burning Hollow yet, you need to. Not that you really need to be told that. I mean, you can't even get close to this place before seeing Burning Hollow and having a big cutscene in front of it.
Yeah.
One thing that can be a little frustrating about this game, which we're starting to see right now, is that because you move around kind of quickly, and enemies tend to appear without much warning, you can get sort of caught up in them. I have several times literally run into an enemy that I did not see and lost that way.
Yeah.
Fortunately, this game has quick reloads, and wouldn't say exactly it has literal checkpoints, but it'll spawn you very close to where you died. So were you reminded of Okami just because of the, making flowers grow for stuff, or was it also all these animals scurrying around?
Kind of both.
Yeah, it's a lot of squirrels. I appreciate that. This game realizes that you can go a long way with very simple, optional stuff. Animals with the most basic AI in the world, just so they can run around. Can still convince you that it's a real place. What do you think of the game's art style so far, by the way?
Not bad.
Yeah, I guess I'd say it's middle of the road. It's very nice while you're playing it, actually. But, the paper craft aesthetic, it has been done before.
Well, yeah, but...
This isn't the best of areas to show it off. The trees are very samey. We're going to see levels in a little while that I think are much better at showing a unique aesthetic. I also think this game has a very strong sense of color. But we haven't exactly gotten to see that yet. The last place was all black and red, and this place is going to be green and brown.
The forest resisted her approach, but she knew its secret language.
So, these puzzles start out very simple.
The forest opened to her with
I think literally a 4-year-old could solve this one. Don't worry, it will get more complicated. This isn't a counting game. It's not Reader Rabbit. Although Reader Rabbit is probably the first typing game I ever played.
I'm trying to remember what the first one I ever played was.
Have you played Typing Tutors?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Of course.
Yeah, mine were always game-oriented. I never played any of the ones that were, like, really serious, like Mavis Beacon.
She began to fear the emptiness.
Anything like that, which is hardly even a
More than
game
she
at that
feared the
point, I would say.
shadows.
That's just instructional software. It's like Rosetta Stone. Actually, that gives me a great idea. Why has no one made a game out of Rosetta Stone? An adventure where you have to learn Russian. Learn Russian or die. Press Niet to learn Russian. No. Foreign language QuickTime events is actually one of the worst ideas I've ever had in my life. And that's saying something.
Oh, God.
Write our initials in the bark.
Voice recognition software.
That's an idea. I need to... excuse me, I need to quit now. I need to call Ubisoft.
Yeah, that wouldn't be like a painful exercise.
That wouldn't be like a really terrible idea. No, I like the idea of educational games, and I don't think we have gone far enough with them. I think we can do better. This game is a step in the right direction, I would argue.
She was strong before them.
One thing about the enemies in this area, they're a little boring. The last one we had a few different varieties, and this is almost entirely spiders. Which, I mean, if you've ever been to a real forest, you know there are a cornucopia of strange insects. It's exactly the opposite of real life. You don't just walk into the forest and see tons of spiders.
And the forest sighed in relief.
Unless you're reading The Hobbit. You know, I never watched those movies. Did they emphasize the spiders in the forest? Or were they more elf-oriented?
They were in there.
What's going on? Why won't you answer me?
They're not very exciting. Like, in terms of stuff that Tolkien came up with that was interesting, his spiders are really not that special. Compared with his trolls.
Really aren't.
By the way, am I the only one who likes the way the trolls are portrayed in The Hobbit way better than they are in Lord of the Rings? Where they're basically just, like, 40-year-old skinheads from some inner city part of Britain, instead of literal trolls.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
They were a lot funnier back then. And also smarter.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the concept of a smart troll is just weird to a lot of people.
Yeah. Well,
honestly, that's probably one thing people don't consider about The Hobbit, is that a lot of it was a little too weird for people who are used to Lord of the Rings. Like, goofy and jokey. I'm not going to say that it's not in the same style as Lord of the Rings, like that it's not a saga, but it feels like it's more influenced by other children's books than his later stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You can sort of see the spirit of like a Beatrix Potter in there or something like that, which you cannot find in Lord of the Rings, which is just 100% Wagnerian epic.
Yeah.
Close to her once more.
If anyone in the comments says it's not Wagnerian, it totally is. He stole
didn't
everything from
understand
Wagner.
why.
Kinda.
Wagner's the only guy who gets to write about rings. With anyone else, it's plagiarism.
Sometimes it tried to guide her in its way.
So, the way the game talks about the forest is kind of interesting. That it's, like, got a personality and it's reluctant to open up to her. Do you recall another game that you and I have seen that talk a little bit like this?
The forest yearned for her to wander deeper.
Which one is that?
Oh, well, I'm not going to tell you. You have to figure it out. Like I said, this is the game that I was talking about earlier, where if I said it would completely give the game away. Well, there's no need to solve all the problems in the first episode.
I mean, unless you're talking... It's not Alice, right?
Shoot. Well, first episode. You heard it here first, folks. Yes, Alice, American McGee's Alice is exactly what I was talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So now you basically know. But we'll work out exactly how that shows itself as the game goes on.
Yeah, that game... I don't know. I remember I got close to the end of that game.
Yeah, right.
And then hit a wall and...
It's actually a very difficult game. I'd say it has more in common with Quake than, like, other nursery rhyme-themed
There's
games.
something rotten here.
Well, it was on the Quake engine.
I know. What I meant was, it's really hard
Forest was but an
when you
echo.
consider
Yeah.
the inspiration for the story, which is really childish. I mean, I like Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. All I'm saying is it's a little weird for a game based on it to be that hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's also got the problems of its era, you know? I mean, there was tons of platforming in not great 3D.
There was a lot of platforming.
And it was just really
and
hard.
Yeah, the physics was not really up to it.
It was like Half-Life platforming,
Creeping
which
cobwebs
everyone hated
choked.
platforming in Half-Life. That's why they had almost
Yeah.
none of it in Half-Life 2. So anyway, here's another puzzle. It's very simple. Basically just light all of those braziers on fire so that you can see the letters that you need to hit.
Ah.
It's interesting. The runes we have here
burned
are
away the
not
blight.
the same, I think,
The
as the ones
forest
that
would
appear when
learn
you
to love
haven't
once
learned an
more.
elemental power yet. It's two different sets.
Hmm.
There's something familiar about the runes that appear on these things, but I don't quite know what it is. Maybe it's just that they're, similar. Like, one is clearly an Omega, which is just Greek. Oh, by the way, here's the QWERTY scroll.
Oh, yeah.
Another one is a square, which I think of from Japanese. A square is kuchi, meaning mouth.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. They use those in those... I forget what the name of it is. There's this Japanese thing. I wouldn't exactly call it a craft. It's more just like a joke. Where you make a face out of characters. Like out of letters. What, ideograms, really. But you always have a little round mouth for Kuchi. And then the eyes will be Mei, which does actually look a lot like an eye.
So what does leveling up fire do?
Leveling up fire causes it to burn the next word faster. Which is useful because it means you can get to the next word after that. So the stuff I've upgraded so far. I've upgraded velocity, the first step, which means I move faster. Very useful. I highly recommend getting that fully upgraded early on.
Yeah.
I also just upgraded perseverance, which means the combo lasts longer. That'll become very helpful soon. You can have some really long combos in this game. That's one of the things I appreciate about it, is that this game actually... has a pretty high skill ceiling as far as typing is concerned. What I mean by that is that you can be really stylish and rack up a huge combo. The combo's not just, there for helping you out. It can also be a pretty good self-imposed challenge to get a high one.
Yeah.
And once you can run, suddenly it becomes this fun trick of trying to find what's going to get you the next part of the combo. So you get a little frantic. Everyone loves that, right?
We planted this
course.
seed together.
Anyway, here we're solving a multi-part puzzle to reveal the next set of shapes.
Interesting. Interesting.
Very basic. Puzzles in this game do ramp up. The optional areas have puzzles that are a little more complicated than real ones. It never gets to Zelda level. But it gets surprisingly high. You would think that a game like this could not have decent puzzles. But some of them are pretty good. I also really like some challenges that aren't really puzzles, but they're more like reflex tests. We're going to see one of those in the next optional area. Which is actually quite a while from now. About an hour.
And there we go.
So this is a little tricky, this area, because, the way it's set up is to travel in this diagonal movement pattern with the keys that have been set up. And this area is just off enough that it's tricky to find out how to maneuver your way around it. You can get a little mixed up. It may be easier to use WASD in this part.
Finally united.
So here we're in the heart of the forest pretty much, and there are just insect nests all over the place.
I feel like we're kind of talking over the story.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not much of a story.
Oh, no. Not at all.
Also, people can see it. That's the great thing about this being a typing game.
Well, and people can always look at
It doesn't matter what we jabber over this, We'll see it. That's the great thing about subtitle Let's Plays.
Exactly.
I watch a lot of Let's Plays on something awful, so some of them will do a thing where they'll have an uncut video and a cut video. On the cut one, the commentary is cut out of the cutscenes. Cut doesn't sound like a real word anymore. Anyway, commentary is left out of the cutscenes. And that's for people who are more interested in the story. But the uncut ones, you get to hear people just, tell silly jokes over it. And I always go for that, because honestly, why would you watch a Let's Play of of a game whose story you don't know? If you don't know it, watch, like, a walkthrough, right? I'm pretty sure there are walkthroughs of this game on YouTube. This was... I'm not going to say it was a huge success. It's not a household name. But this was a reasonably popular game. I'm not kidding myself that I'm going to give it more exposure by my Let's Play. I just thought it was a great game and I wanted to show it off. I might do a Let's Play in the recent future that actually would give a game considerable exposure that it doesn't have, because that game came out recently. This game came out about 2 years ago. So this is pretty much the same trick as the last one we saw in Burning Hollow, which is just use fire, alternate, your targets. It's just a little bit harder. That's generally the theme of the optional areas, is they have the same challenge as the mandatory area they're associated with, and they just ramp up the difficulty a little bit. You can see we're getting a lot more fast enemies here than the last time. One other thing is that because of the game's adaptive difficulty, it is also getting harder completely apart from the regular difficulty of the game. I'm pretty sure it has not hit the top yet. The top level of difficulty in this game is called Insane. I'm pretty sure I get up to it at by about the second optional dungeon. I'm at that point.
Wow.
Yeah, we're getting some bigger words here. The bigger words are honestly my favorite, even though they show off something difficult in this game, which is that the longer the words are, and especially when there's lots of enemies on screen, sometimes you can get stuck in the middle of a word, type a letter that you've already typed, and get mixed up. Then you'll try to type the rest of the word, and it will default to a different word on screen, because it does that.
Oh.
It tries to switch when it feels you're trying to do a different word, and that can mean that it takes your attention away from an enemy that's right next to you, which can kill you.
I think it should auto-select every enemy to whom that letter combination would apply until you get more specific.
It does do that kind of, but not as well as it should, perhaps. I was going to say I was playing this. This game isn't buggy. I'm actually surprised by how well it runs. But that is the one thing I would say is close to a bug, if not an actual bug. Anyway, that's it for this episode. Next time we're going to be seeing the Drowning Halls, which is that big watery area that you saw last time. Hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy the next one too. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.